The Boston Celtics trade Jaylen Brown, a Finals MVP coming off his best year in the NBA, to none other than the 76ers, Philadelphia's very own, that eliminated them just last postseason in the playoffs. And the best thing they got in return is a 36-year-old coming off a drug suspension just last season. Now you may be wondering how, what, where, and most importantly, why the fuck did we do this? I'm going to tell you exactly that. My name is Eddie Hernandez, and welcome to the show. Yes, the Brown and Tatum era in Boston has officially come to an end. Broke on Wednesday, July 1st, sending Brown to the city of brotherly love in exchange for Paul George in the big 2026. All right, before we get to the real meat and potatoes of this trade, let's break down what was actually included in this deal. So Boston traded Brown in exchange for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. One of those being a 2028 favorable swap, the other a 2031 unprotected. And for those second-rounders, one being in 2028 and one being in 2030. Boston also signed Mike Conley and a surprise swing here, Mitchell Robinson, the longest tenured player on the New York Knicks, who actually won a championship with the team just this season, is now heading to the Celtics. Now, I want you to pause for a second and understand how that sounded. Is very interesting. Hearing that a Knicks player is going to the Celtics sounds pretty disgusting, correct? We're going to touch more on that. It's a very similar situation with this very trade. So as we previously mentioned, this is Jaylen Brown's best season in the NBA, individual player stat-wise, and they swapped him for 36-year-old Paul George, who was suspended for 20-plus games last season for failing a drug test, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. Yikes. Honestly, hearing that as a fan, Philly, you're jumping up in joy. That sounds fucking amazing. If you're a Boston fan, you just got robbed. Maybe not robbed because that implies you weren't giving up your shit willingly. But the Celtics did do that. Like, it really is hard to believe. Let me just give you Jaylen Brown's stat line last season. 28 points per game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, all career highs. Second team All-NBA, arguably first team worthy, with a 56 wins for Paul George, who had less than 17 points these last 2 seasons in Philly. Like, where? It just doesn't make any sense. It's perplexing. Kawhi Leonard, at 35 years old, got a bigger return than Jaylen Brown. Mind you, Kawhi Leonard is currently being investigated by the NBA. Man, it seems like it went wrong for Boston here, and there's really one man to blame, someone who's been having sort of a shortcoming as of recent, that being none other than Brad Stevens, who couldn't get the Giannis deal done or a decent return for Jaylen Brown in general. So the consensus online is that Brad Stevens just made probably the worst move in Celtics history. And while it might be too early to give it that title, the possibility of that being the case is very high with what just happened. What a fall from grace for Stevens, often seen as the model GM figure around the league, being able to secure just these great deals and known as a scammer around the NBA. His resume was full of consistency along the trades that were able to get this team in a position to win championships. And then this year, he sort of shit the bed. If you look earlier on with the Vucevic for Simons trade, that looks like a bad trade now. Vucevic being basically unplayable all season. And then you have him missing out on Giannis, knowing that the Celtics and the Heat were the front runners to land him. Jaylen Brown's value being at its highest. You have to make sure you find a good package around that. There's still other assets out there that could possibly help the Celtics. And you fail. I don't know where. With all the talent in the league right now, he decided to look for it just down I-95 and bring Paul George from the Sixers there. It's just so confusing. Now, some people are painting it under the light of there's moves to be made still, which I do agree with. There will be moves still made by the Celtics. It still feels like it was a settlement. Now, let me clarify. This isn't a Paul George being a bad player conversation. He's still a very good defender, can shoot the ball well. But in terms of comparing assets and what you have with Jaylen Brown and the player he currently is to Paul George and the player he currently is, there's some distance to cover. But looking at this deal alone, it just doesn't really make too much sense. The grading is pretty low. Like a miss from Brad Stevens and crew. It seems like you were outside with a sign shouting who won him. Yet Jaylen Brown never requested a trade himself. That's not going to give you the leverage you want when you're making these sort of deals. And again, just sending him to Philly it's weird. Like, they just beat you with a historic 3-1 comeback in the playoffs. They've been rivals in the East for how long? It's usually something you want to do when you make a trade trade is that you want to send your player almost as far away as from you as possible to make sure it doesn't come back and bite you in the ass, especially with a rival team. So you look to send them into the other conference, instead of keeping them in the East, you send them to the West and vice versa. The process was just bad. And what we're going to talk about next is that you just created a monster in the East. Now, with Brown going to Philly, there are two things to consider. One being the fit off the court with personalities. The second being on the court. Now, in terms of on the court fit, Jaylen Brown and this team look like a real threat out East. You have the all-star in Maxey, the rising star in VJ Edgecombe, the former MVP, Joel Embiid, and now the Finals MVP with Jaylen Brown on this team. This is a real squad. Great core of players to have. One of the biggest things being the rim pressure with Maxey, Brown, and Edgecombe. With that combination of guards, all of them are strong athletic drivers. Then you have the spacing, all three of them being able to knock down threes pretty well. Reliable shooters. Good in the mid-range, good beyond the arc. Then you have the former MVP in Joel Embiid. We know what his production is capable of, being a great floor spacer as a 5. A decent defender when he's healthy. Offensively, there's a lot of talent on this team. There's still some gaps to fill, one of them being another defensive anchor. They did pick up Dean Wade, but that's not necessarily going to be enough. But you got the hardest part out of the way, that being the superstar talent. I mean, you have that here with just those 4 alone. I feel pretty comfortable with my chances. Another thing being creation for this team. You're going to need to find someone who can be an elite ball handler. All of them averaging under maybe 6 assists per game. Also, Maxey being a score-first point guard. That's going to be hard when Jaylen Brown's also known to do the same thing. Yeah, he can make some good passes here or there, but he's not really known to be that. Embiid, same boat, can make a decent pass, but is mostly a scorer. And there's only so many shots to go around, so you really need someone who can get in here and not be selfish, get this ball moving and slowing down this offense using these pieces correctly. Some interesting names out there people have been talking about. I think the biggest one I would like to see is LeBron. I think that'd be fucking awesome. On the basketball court, I think this is a really solid team. If I'm a Phillies fan, I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can get done. And then looking at the emotional side of things and personality fit, this is where things can be a little bit more of a question mark. Now, Jaylen Brown and how he's viewed around the league, I feel has a lot of nuance to it. In layman's terms, he's always been a player with a chip on his shoulder, having a lot to prove since the moment he got into the NBA, being a Robin to another player when he first got in, that being Kyrie, and then as time went on, Tatum exploding onto the scene. And then you have things like him winning Finals MVP in their championship run, just really fueling this fire inside of him, while at the same time also creating question marks around, is he the best player? Is he capable of being a great player or leading a team to winning basketball? And then last season, he got the opportunity to do that. With Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles, Jaylen Brown was considered to be the #1 option with a lot of expectations placed on him. And what did he do? He delivered.
Pizza time.
He had his best season in the NBA, best being different from favorite, turned the whole Celtics season around, thought they were going to have a gap year and be a play-in team at best, to end up the #2 seed in the East, convincing people around the league that they were actual championship contenders. Spoiler alert, they weren't. They actually lost up 3-1 in the series against none other than the very team he's playing for now. But he still proved that he's capable of being the Batman. So why would you trade that player? And that's when you get into the personality question mark around Jaylen Brown and how people actually feel about him. There's situations like the Olympics not getting on the roster while 3 of your teammates do. Also the Nike situation when he's having this beef online. Hairspray gate. And more recently, you now have the infamous Jaylen Brown live streams. Nothing like a millionaire deciding to take views away and become a live streamer as well, right? So Jaylen Brown gets on these live streams and he just starts making these crazy comments after getting eliminated, talking about the agenda he believes is being pushed against him in the NBA, calling out the refs and their officiating of games in the series and the biases he believes exist within the referees. And he starts calling out players by name, actually. One name in particular that stands out is his new former MVP teammate, Joel Embiid. So Jaylen Brown gets on the mic and just starts talking about how Joel Embiid plays unethical hoops, things like foul baiter and the flopper, if you will.
I mean, this is my personal opinion on basketball. Some of y'all might disagree. You know what I mean? But argue with your grandma. Flopping has ruined our game. Joel Embiid is a great player, one of the best bigs in fucking basketball history. Flops. He know it. This ain't breaking news. This ain't, you know what I mean? It is what it is.
And yeah, he just starts looking like a real sore loser, if we're being honest. It was not a great look for him, the organization. It rubbed people the wrong way. And this is also where he said those things along the lines of it being his favorite season. Now, it's important to remember this is a season he proved he was Batman and his career highs across the board. But people weren't a fan of the wording, considering this is a Finals MVP who won a championship in another year before that. It seemed like it was the final nail in the Jaylen Brown and Boston coffin. And now here we are, a Philadelphia 76er. But yes, things look very different out east now. The picture is starting to get a bit clearer on where things are landing, with Kawhi now being in Toronto again, which we'll talk about in another video. Giannis in South Beach with Miami. The reigning champs with the New York Knicks. Boston getting a healthy Tatum, Indiana having Halliburton back, and Philly jumping up on the fold here as well. The Vegas odds for the Sixers actually increased from 60-1 to 22-1 to win the finals from DraftKings. So it seems like we can all agree the 76ers came out of this one the winners. Grading the trade for both sides here, I'm going to give the 76ers an A+. You got off of Paul George, a 36-year-old, off a bad contract in the NBA, for a 29-year-old coming off his best season, career highs across the board. And you only give up 2 firsts and 2 seconds in general. In true Philly fashion, they robbed him. So yes, Philly gets an A+. Boston, on the other hand, F fucking failure. This was a diabolical trade done by the front office. Brad Stevens should be under fraud watch as of today. This is not a good look for the Boston Celtics. I know there are other moves to be made, but as of right now, grading this move alone, F tier, not a good trade. But that is all we have on the Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers, second biggest domino we expect it to fall here in this postseason, right behind Giannis, who we saw last week. But there are still many more great stories to cover in the NBA. Another one being the news from LeBron James leaving the Los Angeles Lakers. Going to a different suitor around the league. We're going to see where he goes. Now, he can't officially be traded till July 6th, so we're going to have to wait a couple days to see what happens on that end. But rest assured, we will cover it on this channel. Thank you all again for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Comment down below what your thoughts are on the trade. Should Philadelphia's front office hang a banner inside the building? But as always, guys, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you again.